good morning to you. Are you the only person from the SNP that's left not watching the football?
It does appear like that on occasions, but no, we've plenty of people around the country working very, very hard.
OK. What are you calling for in regard to the NHS in your manifesto?
Well, in the NHS in particular, we are very conscious about the threat of privatisation, both from the Tories and indeed from Labour after Wes Streeting's comments. But what we're calling for is massive investment in it, an extra 10 billion across the UK. We're also calling for the UK government in England to match the pay deals which have been given by the Scottish Parliament, Scottish government already. That would put around 16 billion or so into the extra into the UK health service and a comparable amount back into the Scottish NHS. We think that's the right thing to do. The NHS has been under pressure, it's under threat now. We must save it and we must invest in it.
How much is it going to cost?
The costings have all been done. That will be issued later for anyone who's interested in it, but all those numbers have been completely worked out. The key thing about the costings on this, and the same thing applies to the 18 billion of cuts baked into both the Tory and Labour figures, they're only cuts, if you like. They're only going to be an extra debt or borrowing, if you like, if you accept the Tories' fiscal framework and you accept the Tories' tax plans. Now, we don't. We're calling on Labour to reject those as well, and if they fail to do so, we're going to end up in a position, if they win the election, where they'll be having 18 billion of pre-planned Tory cuts baked into the UK economy.
OK. The reason I'm asking you is because the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, suggested that back in February your figures were misleading and spending on Scottish NHS was on course to fall. Is that correct?
No, I don't believe spending on the Scottish NHS is forecast to fall, and clearly the proposal we're making at this election is to see an increase in NHS spending across the whole of the UK. If we don't do anything, it's likely to fall across the UK, and as you and your viewers know, if NHS spending is subject to cuts in England, there's a consequential cut comes to Scotland, and we certainly must avoid that.
Interestingly, because these very clever people are saying, according to their analysis, their figure was based on a comparison. Your figure was based on a comparison with the spending allocated in the original 23-24 Scottish budget and didn't take into account in-year top-ups of extra funding that have been added since. So as a result, that would mean there would be a drop of 0.7% in real terms in 24-25.
Well, I'm sorry, you're talking about figures from February. The real issue here, is that when the UK allocated its funding to the NHS, it did not factor in future inflation. That's the real problem, because as you know, the way the funding is allocated... Is you saying the figures are not going to go down, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies has illustrated why they will go down. So I'm asking you to explain to me why they're wrong. Well, I'm saying to you, the figures you're quoting are from February. We're now into June, almost into July. The proposal we're making is for a 16 billion investment, extra investment, in the NHS across the UK. That will see a real terms rise in the figures, not a fall, based on the UK government failing to factor in inflationary rises when they set the figures on the last occasion they did so.
OK, I think we've made that point and people will make up their own mind. John Swinney has promised the most left-wing manifesto of the general election. What will make it the most left-wing manifesto of the general election?
I think the principle around it is that it's a hopeful alternative to the failed Westminster system. So we need to tackle the issue of Brexit, which means getting back into the European Union. We need to tackle the issue of public sector cuts, which are coming down the track unless we can stop them, and that's why a large number of SNP MPs will make a difference. And it's also about specific proposals, the essentials guarantee to make sure people can genuinely afford the basics. It's about social tariffs on energy, on telecoms, on things which are now not luxuries but absolute essentials. So there'll be a whole range of measures, costed measures, in the manifesto which will make it extremely progressive and, I suspect, extremely attractive indeed.
OK, just explain to me, because I haven't got this, How can you put a social tariff on energy when energy is not devolved?
No, this is a UK policy for a UK election. So the UK government, any UK government, could introduce a social tariff. They could do that by law. They could do it through persuasion with the energy companies. We saw it with the energy cap. The problem is that cap was
could you? The SNP can't do it
quickly.
The SNP can't do it, can they?
Oh no, the SNP can't do that. No. This is a reserved matter. Energy is reserved. This has got to be a UK policy. This is a UK election. And this is exactly the kind of measure SNP MPs will be pushing for when we return to Westminster.
Something that you can definitely comment on is one of your candidates saying that your party had no problem with North Sea oil and gas drilling. Did they misspeak, or is that the case?
I think that was a bit of a misspeak. The position on oil and gas was made very clear by the First Minister a week or so ago. We remain absolutely committed to achieving net zero. He said himself that, even during the transition we will need oil and gas, but any new licence application must be subject to a climate compatibility test. I think there was a slight misspeak yesterday.
OK. I hate to break this to you, Mr Hosie, but a recent YouGov poll suggesting that you could actually be in a far worse condition than the Conservatives on the night of the election in terms of percentage of seats lost. Is there still an appetite for independence in Scotland?
Well, the last Survation poll had independence ahead. It also had the SNP 7 points ahead of Labour. There have been lots of polls. The ones at the start of this campaign, for obvious reasons, weren't good. We've caught up. Some polls now show we've overtaken Labour. I think the formulation you used, that we could percentage-wise lose more than the Tories on polling day, I suspect will not happen.
Yeah, I mean, the latest YouGov poll suggesting that you would go down to 15 seats, and if the election was held now, you would lose 64.6% of the total seats that you had in 2019.
And the Survation poll said we'd win 36. That means winning the general election in Scotland. These polls, I think, were 24 hours apart. People will pay an interest to polls. Politicians do, of course we do. We like good ones. We don't like less good ones. I think the only poll that matters is the 4th of July. What I can tell you is that the ground campaign the SNP is running is first class. Our social media reach is very, very good indeed. Okay. And with interviews like this, we're getting a message across in the mainstream as well. So let's see what happens on the 4th of July.
And to that end, what are you going to do about Aberdeenshire North and North Moray East now that Labour are not fielding a candidate there anymore after his pro-Russia tweets?
Well, we're trying to win the Aberdeenshire North and Moray East seat. Obviously, that candidate can't pull out. The time for that has come and gone. I think Labour perhaps should have been a little tighter with their vetting in the first place.
A point that I made to the Shadow Chancellor in the last hour. It's good to see you as always. Enjoy the football tonight. Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the list of candidates standing in the constituency of Aberdeenshire North and Moray East. Well, trust me, not many of them are there. There they go. There we are. These are the candidates. As you can see, Andy Brown now standing as an independent after Labour said, you are not standing under our ticket.